You see, when it often stands, its hips are tightened. When it stands, you can see its feet. The Achilles tendon is already dragging outward, the feet are already turned out, and the arch has collapsed. In other words, when your foot realizes, when I'm supporting with one foot and you no longer need me, why should I maintain such good elasticity? Why should I maintain such tense muscles? It simply relaxes. And once it relaxes, the fascia on the sole of your foot loses its elasticity and your arch collapses. So there's a term called use it or lose it. It means that the more you use your broad strategy, the more it improves, and the less you use your narrow strategy, the more it regresses. So you will find that nowadays, whether it's children or adult men and women, there are a lot of cases of flat foot and inversion, which represents the issues with most people's narrow strategy. Because activating the narrow strategy is not as quick as activating the broad strategy. Activating the broad strategy allows me to stabilize it in the shortest time possible. Therefore, we are reluctant to go through a long period of having no skills. We hope to directly enter Tai Chi. A member who originally couldn't stand steadily, I made them stable in 2 minutes. Of course, I'm willing to pay for that. I'm happy, and I'm progressing quickly. As a coach, I made them stand steadily in 2 minutes, and I feel a great sense of achievement. That's why I like this thing even more. You will find that for those of us who habitually do single leg support training, the arches of the feet, big toes, and heel bones often show varying degrees of heel inversion and eversion, arch collapse, and big toe valgus. It's because when we do all the training, the more disciplined you are, the more you practice, the longer you persist, the more resilient and determined you become, the more your broad strategy is strengthened and your narrow strategy is inhibited. And when we do similar training, it all promotes the broad strategy. Well, so what happens if the strategy choice is wrong? In just one sentence, if you are not injured or you haven't practiced deliberately, the brain will not casually change an inherent force pattern it is familiar with. What does that mean? If, since you were a child learning to walk, you were dominated by a narrow strategy without a broad strategy, and due to long periods of sitting, your narrow strategy has somewhat deteriorated. However, before you go to the gym or hire a personal trainer, you are still using a narrow strategy, just with diminished capability. So what happens is, you spend money on classes, go to the gym, and then the trainer tests you and finds that your single leg support is unstable. At this point, they start activating your hip joints, 1 round, 2 rounds, which strengthens your broad strategy, and then you become more stable. Therefore, you believe this direction is correct, and you continue to repeatedly increase the intensity in this direction. So at this point, because of your deliberate practice, your brain transforms your original, familiar, inherent pattern into this new pattern. Another scenario is that you have a strategy in mind, but you choose to play basketball. During the process of playing basketball, there are many collisions, and you severely sprain both ankles. After spraining your ankles, the brain prioritizes taking care of the weaker part. When my ankle bears weight, I notice it hurts a lot. When I tighten the equipment, the pressure on my foot is reduced. So at this time, in order to alleviate the pain, the brain will choose to use another mode. At this point, when you use this mode for a long time, you remain in this mode. Therefore, the 2 most common situations where the brain changes movement patterns are injury and pain and deliberate practice. When we coaches change modes, what we do most is deliberate practice. So when we are deliberately practicing a mode with a member, you must make sure that this direction is correct. If you are not clear about it, the following situation may occur. Many people say, I am so diligent, I am so disciplined, I exercise every day, I eat boiled vegetables, I eat boiled chicken breast, and then my starting point is very low, I practice my movements well, why do I still have pain here and there? Why do I frequently get a stiff neck or back pain? Why do I still have hemorrhoids? Why is my digestion poor? Why is my sleep poor? A whole bunch of problems arise. So, in the end, nothing seems wrong, yet today everything about myself seems wrong. It actually comes down to the fundamental logic of direction. You see, including our current anatomy software, anatomical diagrams, and the professional books you read, they all indicate it this way. Audience noise. In other words, they have also been misled. They tell you that in such a posture, you need to tighten the red areas, which then guides us. When you're unstable in such a posture, you need to strengthen these red areas, but then you're just messing around, being led blindly. It optimizes your broad strategy and suppresses your narrow strategy because the broad strategy more easily leads to balance. So once you've chosen your strategy, there is a boundary between your narrow and broad approaches, which is like a combination welding. Then you become a kite with a broken string. Your feet, your heels, and your calves are disconnected from your sit bones because you start by tightening your hip joints. Then your breathing gets stuck in the inhalation phase, and once your exhalation is suppressed, you get stuck in a state of anxious excitement. This leads to your jaw muscles not being able to relax, your heart rate not being able to decrease, your spinal joints becoming slippery, and your knee joints becoming prone to pain because the connection between your heels and hip joints is broken. During standing, your toes, which should be leading, are instead dominated by the upper broad strategy, turning you into a rootless tree. The stronger you train your upper body, the greater the pressure on your spinal joints because the vertical line from bottom to top is broken. The heavier the load, the more likely you are to be unable to bounce back, and the more prone you are to habitual back strains. So many big guys are always curious about why, despite having such well-developed muscles, they still experience habitual dislocations, still sleep awkwardly, and still suffer from back strains. It's because your upper body is too large, and you've excessively done a lot of squats and deadlifts, which have strengthened the wide sides. Therefore, your feet are disconnected, and they can't control your lumbar spine or thoracic spine at all. This leads to deformed feet, limping, and a crooked face. The most feared saying is, the strong get stronger. When you train your buttocks to become more and more like a peach, and when you develop your glutes more and more without ever paying attention to your feet, as soon as you stand or walk, you will use your glutes. Your chest and Achilles tendon area will be tight, and your ankle lateral balance will be increasingly neglected, leading to this situation. Then, you'll also notice something quite amusing, which is that women who train for peach-shaped buttocks can leg press 300 to 400 kilograms and do hack squats with 200 to 300 kilograms. But when it comes to training their toes, they can't even be bothered to lift a towel. Yep. So, the weight difference between these exercises is extremely significant. So, in this situation, the imbalance between them will become more pronounced, leading to more and more inexplicable pains, especially knee pain, hip pain, and lower back pain, as well as plantar fasciitis. So, you can understand it this way. The plantar fasciitis that occurs from walking or standing for long periods is due to the increasing loss on her ankle side. The pain experienced while brushing teeth, washing face, or washing hair is due to the increasing loss on her ankle side. The lower back pain during housework is due to the further degeneration on her ankle side. You can understand it like this. However, many times we end up with aesthetically pleasing glutes, but our body's functionality continues to decline. Our breathing becomes more erratic, heart rate increases, and the sympathetic nervous system becomes more excited. So in the end, we conservatively train to look good, but not be functional.